Okay, February 28th, 2023. So we're continuing with our nighttime Benos Pima classes. Alright, so I want to talk, so we're going to continue with our Fundamentals of Jewish Thought series that we've been doing. We started off with the ABCs of Judaism. You know, we talked about intellectual humility as being the starting point of all, followed by understanding life's purpose, followed by understanding that Torah is instructions from Shemayim on how to do those things. And we went in depth on how do you know what you know, and also on purpose. That's what we've done so far. So that's 3 classes, right? We've had 3 classes. Yeah. So now what I want to talk about, which is kind of a parallel to the idea of Torah, is wisdom, right? Wisdom. What is wisdom? Let's start off by asking ourselves what the word means. How would you define wisdom?
Something you know. I feel like it comes.
So what's the difference? Sorry, one answer at a time. How would you therefore differentiate between knowledge and wisdom?
Is wisdom something you gain through experience?
So, don't you also gain knowledge through experience?
Yeah.
So I haven't yet seen a difference between them. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was thinking maybe like something with age, maybe?
So that probably goes along with experience. But you also get knowledge as you get older,
right.
Hopefully. You guys have an idea? How would you, knowledge is what you know, right? It's information in your head, okay?
Sounds like something like more spiritual, like type of thing.
We're not going spiritual right now. We're going to keep it very, very simple. So let's actually define all of these words, right? Knowledge. How do you say knowledge in Hebrew?
Hold on.
What was that? No.
Oh, das is wisdom.
Good. So how do you say knowledge? There you go. Right, Chachma is knowledge. Very good.
I learned it in the Shirashim.
What was that?
I learned it in Shirashim when I was a child.
Oh, that's a while ago, right? Wisdom we're going to call Das.
Right?
And we're going to add one more because we have to have the whole Chabad up here, right? So what's Bina, right? Understanding.
Intuition.
Right?
Understanding.
Now, there's a few different ways. There's a few words that are all very similar, but can give you different angles on them. So, like, along with understanding, okay, let's break it down according to the way the rabbis understand it, and we're going to focus on Das today. Das is wisdom. That's what we want. But you have to build up to it, right? You can't just start with Das. You can't have Das without wisdom and understanding, okay? Without knowledge and understanding. It drives me a little crazy because if you look in a lot of the Sfarim, they're translated, like Chachma was translated as wisdom, and Das as knowledge, but that's actually really not a very good translation based on the way the rabbis define the words, right? So you have to take it, every time you read something, like, okay, who's translating this? What do they mean? See, it forces you to work a little bit at it, but once you get what they really do mean, you'll be able to get a lot of what the rabbis are trying to say. So the rabbis say that the word Chachma actually is a contraction of 2 Hebrew words, Koach Ma. Literally the strength of what, right? It's just you have a grasp of what is. When you know what is, in other words, knowledge, that's Chachma. It's information, it's data, or data, depending on how you want to pronounce that word, right? It's just what you know, what you would store on a hard drive, information, okay? And then the word Bina, the rabbis teach us, comes from the shoresh of boneh, or binyan, to build. It's when you build something, there are 2 things that happen when you build. Is you take things and you put them together, like bricks, and you also take things and you pull them apart. So binyan, Bina, means, understanding is not a bad translation, but I think more usefully would be something like logic, or maybe reason, or maybe rationality. It's when you're able to, because how does logic work? You take things that appear to be different and you see how they're similar, and you take things that appear to be similar and you show how they're different. Right? And where do we see this davening? How do you see this idea so beautifully? Every morning we daven that notein lesechli dina lehavchin bin yom uvein laila. We give to the heart or rooster the bina to be able to distinguish between day and night, to distinguish between things that appear similar, or to show how they are similar, things that appear different, is the power of bina, which in English we would translate as rationality, logic, maybe reason. I think reason and wisdom are closer together, but that's fine. I don't mind reason for bina either. Ultimately, that's what understanding is. When you say you can understand something, that means you can pull it apart, you can put it back together. Cool? And das, which I'm translating as wisdom, really means intimate knowledge, right? Or knowledge that has changed you, or knowledge you've become one with. And this is why the word das is used both for knowledge and also for intimacy. Like it says by Adam and Chava, it says, V'Adam yoda et Chava ishto. Adam had das of his wife and she became pregnant. So obviously the word das means to be closely connected, in that case physically. So why is that same word used for knowledge? It's because it's information that you've become close with. If you can know something but it hasn't changed you in any way, it's not das. The ultimate example of this is lots of people know that smoking is bad for them, but they still smoke. So that knowledge that smoking bad for them has not become das. It hasn't become wisdom. It's only on the level of, chokhmah, maybe even bina. You could have like a deep scientific knowledge about how the smoking you're doing is killing you, but you'll still do it, right? Because it hasn't changed you. Okay, good? Everyone with me? Excellent. So our goal is to get to das, right? And ultimately, right, that's one of the major purposes of Torah study, is to develop a person who's, they call in yeshiva, bar das, right? Literally a son, bas das, right? Person who is in the master of and a part of das. By the way, another word for das that's often used synonymously is seichel, right? Seichel is basically the same as das. That's why when we daven in the fourth bracha, which is really the first thing you ask for, the fourth bracha of Shemona Esrei is either Chacham Bina Das or Chacham Bina V'Haskel, Seichel. Cool?
Very cool.
Cool. All right. Which is, by the way, an interesting side point. The very first thing you ask for, because the first three brachas are praises of Hashem. The first thing you ask for is das. That you can argue because it's the first thing you ask for because it's the most important thing you could ever get. And there's even a Gemara which is a little bit sharp. It says that you're not allowed to have rachmanos on someone who has no das. In other words, someone who's so unwise that they cause themselves harm, it is not in their best interests for you to feel bad for them, because it's not doing them any favors. They need to become wise enough, prudent enough to not do things that are so dumb that they hurt themselves. Okay, good. All right. Any questions so far?
No.
All right. So, Marash Shiva Noach Weinberg, Zeicher Tzadik Levrocho, a great rabbi, he explained that to get to das, there's a few preliminary steps. You need to build yourself up to das. So the first thing we need to know is, right, how to begin to develop knowledge and understanding. Now, we talked about more generally the first, in the A of Judaism, which is intellectual humility, asking questions, and the importance of looking at evidence when we delved into it more deeply. That was still general. Now we're going to go actually step by step by step. How do you look at the world and come to an understanding of it, which will then lead us to das ultimately, right? So number one, the first thing you have to do. What's the first thing that I did with you today? What's the first thing we did? No? We defined. First thing we did is I asked you, what does the word mean? And that is the most important first step. The first step is to be precise in language. Right? Make definitions. Now, the vast majority of people think in words. I've heard that there are some people that think in images, but I've never actually met anyone that's how they usually think. Maybe once in a while, on Purim, you enter a different state of consciousness, and now you're like, images. But generally speaking, when you're thinking, it's words. There's words going through your head, right? They even have a word for that in psychology. It's like self-talk or self-dialogue, right? You're talking with yourself, and that's what thinking generally is. Can you understand? Like, you get that? You see that in your own lives? Yeah. Like words start to go through your head?
Yeah, no, but I think there's both.
there is a little aspect of like a flash or an image, but that's more of an insight or an inspiration. But when you want to actually think about what that insight or inspiration means, you're talking about it with yourself. They're like, how do I get that? What does that mean? How do I understand it, right? So if we think in words, the more precise our words are, the more precise our thinking is. And you actually export your thinking process in something called, what is it called when you export your thinking process? Do you remember? Well, more than just speech. Conversation. A conversation, when you talk with someone, what you're doing with them is the same thing you're doing in your own head. Instead of words bouncing around your head, now it's words bouncing around our heads, right? And with the advantage of that, this is the reason that we are so obsessed in Torah with chavrusa. The reason why chavrusa is an obsession, and when I say obsession, I'm not saying that lightly. It says in the Gemara, chavrusa o motusa. Study partner or death. Those are the options the Gemara gives you. Because the vast majority of us are not good at thinking on our own. Even when you ask somebody, hey, do you want to do this? Or ask them a question, and they say, I'll think about it. They don't really mean, I'll think about it. What they mean most of the time is, I'll agonize over it, not know what to do, and in the end, flip a coin. Most people, to actually sit and think in their own head is too hard. We're too distracted. Our minds are all over. They go back and forth. We get distracted. So that's why you take a piece of paper. You write things out. That's helpful. That writing helps you to have a conversation with yourself in an organized, systematic manner. That's why writing is really good for thinking. If you want to really think through a topic deeply, write an essay about it. When you write an essay about something, that is the best thinking you might ever do in your entire life. Because now you're asking questions, and you're trying to answer those questions, and then you're going to go to research, and you're going to ask about it, and you're going to come back to it. And when the writing's in the paper, and you look at it, you're going to go, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. How often do you do that in your own head? Not as much as we should. How many times have you been talking to somebody, and you'll say something, and then you'll go, it sounded better in my head, right? Because we didn't actually pay attention to it enough until it left our mouth. And then our ears hear it and go, it sounded kind of dumb, right? So conversation or writing are two ways of exporting this process from in our brains outside. And they're super, super useful. Regardless, with all these things, the first and most important step is define your words. Be precise in your language. Now, I have found, personally, in my experience and in my education, that there are three areas that this is the most egregious, you would say, that people make this mistake all the time, and it leads to so much confusion. The first is in religion. The second is in politics. And the third is in men and women. Right? So in religion, we see this all the time. I had one of my rabbis where somebody said to him, Rabbi, I don't believe in God. And my rabbi says, I don't either. The guy goes, well, aren't you a rabbi? He goes, yeah, isn't that like kind of your job? He goes, well, what do you mean by God? And then when the student explained, the rabbi said, oh yeah, I don't believe in that at all, what you just said. I believe in something entirely different. Now, what's the student going to ask if they want to actually know anything? What's your definition? So now you're having a real conversation, right? You ever get into an argument with somebody and realize 5 minutes later you weren't actually arguing, you were just using words differently?
Yeah.
All the time. That's because you're not being precise in your language. What do the words mean? Right? So now, politics, that's ridiculously common, right? The way that, just to oversimplify, but if you're on the political left and political right, you will use the same exact words and mean entirely different things. Freedom, equality, justice, like these words that you think we all agree on, and we don't. Like, at all. And sometimes they might mean the opposite. It's actually quite astonishing. And so what happens? Look, I'm a good person, right? We're all good people. So when I'm talking to somebody, and they're clearly so wrong, They must be a bad person to believe something so wrong. And that's part of the reason why there's so much animosity and hatred in politics today, is because people are often, some of it is that there's bad players who are trying to cause trouble. But I don't think that's most people. I honestly don't think most people are like that. I think most people are just so sold on their own definitions of these words, they can't conceive that there's other ways to look at this. So the only alternative to them is that these must be bad actors. They must mean harm. Instead of just going, oh, you're a good person who just understands the word differently than me. And men and women, again, it's like super common. I speak to mixed audience, rage students, men and women, and I had this happen, let's see, at least 30 times over the years with big groups. I'll get up and I'll say, a guy comes home and he sees his wife, and he's a good husband. He sees she looks upset. She looks upset. So what does a good husband do? What's wrong? And what does the wife often respond? Nothing. And what does the husband do if he doesn't know what he's doing? Oh, okay. And he walks away. She didn't mean that. She didn't mean nothing is wrong. What she meant was, I want you to keep asking me to prove to me that you really care. Right? Now, I've said this in front of dozens of audiences, and almost every time, this is what happens. All the women in the audience are like, yeah, obviously. Of course. Right? A few of the men are like, yeah, learned that one the hard way. Right? And a large percentage of men are like, what? Really? I had one guy, no joke, I had a guy in the middle of class just burst out going, that explains all my failed relationships. Just like busts out with that. He goes, what? Really? Like, seriously? And then and you see girls like looking at, it could be their boyfriend right next to them, a girl looking at him like, didn't you get that? And the guy's like, no. Like, if you said no, it means no. And she's like, no, it doesn't. And he's like, the same word. Now, body language, facial expression, context, right? But most men don't deal with body language, facial expression, and context. Men are very simple creatures. Here's another one. You're a girl. You say to a guy, could be your brother, could be your dad, could be your husband, what are you thinking about? And he responds, nothing. Right? And you as women go, nah, that's not possible. You're hiding something from me. Oh my God, he's hiding something from me. What is he hiding from me? Is he cheating on me? Right? That's where a woman's brain goes, right? Whereas the guy, we have a part of our brain labeled nothing. And sometimes our thoughts go to that part. Women don't have that part in their brain. There is no, if you look at a woman's brain, there's never nothing. Ever. Ever. Your brain is like a hamster on a wheel. No. If you're not thinking about this, you're thinking about that, you're thinking about this, you're thinking about that. Guys have a superpower. We have the ability to think about nothing. We can just sit there. What you thinking about? Nothing. Can't be. It can be. It can be. Now, you could call that a superpower, or you could call that a crippling immaturity. I don't know. But whatever it is, it's a difference, just like you didn't mean nothing. I did mean nothing. You have to understand the other person. One of my rabbis said that a man trying to understand, he's speaking to men, right? So understand that. He says, a man trying to understand a woman is like an elephant trying to understand an ant. We're like different species. We don't think of things the same way. Now, he's obviously exaggerating for comedic effect, but there is some truth to that. We think about the world differently. We understand things differently. We have different definitions for words. We have different needs. We have different understanding. So, be aware of that. That's the most common places. So, be precise. What do you mean? This actually gives you a tremendous superpower. Which, be careful how you use it. It can be harmful. It's like lightning in a bottle. Be careful when you open it. Somebody will tell you something. Doesn't matter what it is. And you could respond, what do you mean by that? Simple question. Destroys entire arguments. Can be destroyed by just asking that question. What do you mean by that? But, well, you see, really, how shocking that so many people speak so confidently about something they never thought about. What do you mean by that? Oh, okay. What does that mean? What does that word mean? Or here's one. Here's a real sharp one. Where did you get that from? How do you know that? These are all really powerful questions that in the yeshiva world, it's our bread and butter. We say this all day long to each other. In the outside world, people are not used to that. Be careful. I wouldn't suggest using it on a first date. But it could be something like, okay, where are you getting that from? How do you know that? Well, what do you mean by that? Precise. Let's define. One of the biggest parts of Torah learning is this precision in language. We spend a lot of time trying to understand exactly what a word means so that when we use it as precisely as possible. Okay. Any questions on this A? Now, when we apply this precision to our lives, I think my favorite illustration my Rosh Hashiva used to use, he says, if you're not being precise in your language before you speak, that's the same thing as not being precise in your actions before you act. Like, what are you supposed to be doing right now? What are you supposed to be getting out of this? You come here, you guys are much better at this than the average person in the outside world. Infinitely better. You came here at class, you got a pretty generally good idea about what you want. Especially a class like this, where you went out of your way to be here, not part of the normal time. You got a general idea. But a lot of people in life, what they'll do, the analogy is, it's like somebody, who very, very carefully, with lots and lots of time and energy, shoots a bow, and then they come over to the tree, and they take out a bucket of paint, and they draw the bullseye around where the arrow was. Right? So that's a lot of the way we act in life. First we do something, and then when we think about it, we come up with all the reasons and justifications about why what we did was just the right thing. Because there's a normal human ego to not want to have made mistakes, not want to have done the wrong thing. So we justify and we rationalize what we did already. One of the best ways to avoid that is to draw the bullseye first. Yeah?
What's wrong with doing that? Let's say you do something that's like, you know that it doesn't matter what you did, like, overthinking.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I'm justifying my action because I'm probably overthinking. As a woman, I overthink. Right. And it's my anxiety kicking in, so I'm like, okay, fine, doesn't matter. Like, I tell myself that.
So, obviously, overthinking and anxiety about that is an issue. It needs to be dealt with. But leaving that alone, the problem with justifying actions is that it's the Chumash says that you should not bribe a judge, because when you bribe a judge, their judgments will become twisted. So the rabbis explain that we're all judges. What's your judge? Your mind is your judge. What bribes the judge? Yetzer hara bribes the judge, so you can't think straight. And so if you do something, there's a Yetzer hara that must have been good. There's even an idea, let's say you buy a car, and then somebody tells you, oh, you bought that one? Oh, that's not so good. There's another better car. What does our ego want to say? No, this is a good car. And even if they bring you evidence that your car is not as good as the other ones, no. That's a biased publication. Your mind will work hard at showing that you were right. But what if you weren't? What if you made a mistake? What if you did something that was harmful to you or others? You might justify it. You might, in retroactively, show how what you did really was good. Now, and that could lead to bigger problems, because once you've trained your mind that what you did was good, regardless of the evidence, that can lead to very dark places. Because now you could do some really bad things and always think they're good. It's like, step by step by step. The ultimate example, Adolf Hitler, Yimach Shemo. Do you think when he thought about what he did he thought it was bad? Mm-hmm. Not only that, he thought it was the best stuff ever. I am a savior of humanity. That's where that road ultimately could lead to that. So we want to avoid going down that road. We want to start off and say, why am I doing this? What's my goal? What am I trying to get out of it? And if you have a bullseye and you shoot an arrow and it's not in the center, then you know that you missed. You missed the mark. Right? What's the word in Hebrew for missing the mark? Chet. The word chet means to miss the mark. Now we translate it in English as sin. Repent, sinners. You're so evil. You're so bad. Right? But it really just means to miss. Yechete, right? To miss the mark. Made a mistake. Okay, so you can always make mistakes. But if you've been careful to define what you want to do, what's your goal, it's much easier to detect the mistakes. Right? You can still make a mistake, but at least you'll be more likely to detect it if you know what you were trying to do. You can't make a mistake if you don't know what you're doing. Right? What are you doing? I don't know. Well, I guess you can't make an error then. Okay. Good. So, the B of this process, once you've begun to be precise in your language and define things clearly, the second step, right, is to use this precise language and demand it of others. Don't have mushy conversations. I mean, let's be clear. If you're having a conversation just for the sake of having a conversation, who cares what you're talking about, what the words mean, right? Is it a relationship conversation? Then it doesn't really matter. But if it's a conversation with an end goal, something to do, then don't allow others to speak with weak words, right? Because we're working together. So, I know that smoking is bad for me, right? So now I gotta work on actually following the logical next steps of that process. I'm trying to think of it. I had an example in my head. Give me a moment. So somebody says to you, have you ever been in love? What should the correct Jewish response be?
What is love?
Right. What, or to be even more precise, what do you think love means? What do you think love means? Because what do we generally do? We just answer. But how do I know that your definition and my definition, let's say I made a definition. Let's say I defined love. Right? My Rosh Yeshiva said that the Torah defines love as the emotional pleasure you get when you focus on the positive qualities of someone or something. It could be you, it could be Hashem, it could be other people. When you focus on the positive qualities of someone or something, that will awaken within you a positive emotional experience called love. And I saw that the Gottmans and the Gottman Institute, they talk about how sharing fondness and admiration builds love. So I could see the overlap between those ideas. So the latest research on relationships and the Torah values seem to correspond exactly, which I always love when that happens. Okay? But if somebody says to you, what is love? And you ask, what do you mean by love? And they say, that feeling you get when you meet somebody and you're like, or something, or like in Hotel Transylvania, zing, or whatever it is. You're like, well, I don't think that's what love is, actually. Right? Oh, you don't? But everyone knows that's what love is. How do you know that's what everyone knows what love is? Well, because they don't know. They never thought about it. And it's like all the songs, you guys listen to the radio? Right? Like all the songs are all about love, right? You listen to Western music, it's about love didn't work. She left me, right? Yeah. All the R&B rap songs. I don't want to talk about them. Okay, like they're just whether it's good or bad or anything in between, but that's like the number one thing people sing about, talk about, write about, poetry, etc. And we have no idea what the word means. What does love mean, right? And then when we talked about, if you've ever seen, the levels of pleasure class, we talk about love. It's something we focus on. What does the word mean? It doesn't mean in Judaism. It doesn't mean what we say in the Western world. There's no falling in love. You can have attraction, you can have connection, but love, if it's the focus, if it's what my Rosh Yeshiva said, it's the focus on the positive qualities of someone or something, then I need to know what the positive qualities are. I need knowledge. And I need to pay attention. And then we add in the other part of love that Judaism focuses on all the time, which is giving. Ahava, the word is hav. You've probably seen that, very famous. You want to love someone, you got to give to them. So 2 things you need more than anything else. Knowledge of a person, especially the positive, and a commitment to giving to them and building the relationship. And now you can build love. Right? So you ask people. I've had this discussion with students. She used to say it like this all the time, so I do it. To this day, I still do it. I'll go over to a person in class and I say, hey, have you ever been in love? And usually, because people don't know these ideas, they'll say, yeah. And I'll say, how do you know? And she'll be like, what do you mean? I was like, well, let me ask you a different question. Have you ever been a bafufstik? What? Have you ever been a bafufstik? I don't know what that is. Why don't you answer the question? Have you ever been a bafufstik? I don't know what the word means. Oh, but you think you know what love means. Oh, and then people are like, ooh. But it's, what does the word mean? Make a definition and then use it in your conversations. And demand it of others. What did you mean by that? Can you have a rational conversation with somebody who's using words differently than you? No. You can't. Not possible. All right, here's an interesting question. How do you start having a rational conversation with somebody if you don't agree with them on the definition?
Tell them your definition.
What if they don't agree with your definition? Okay, but let's say you kind of have to use that word,
Explain.
So let's say, no, but they don't agree with you.
So then
Let me give you, but assuming you want to have the conversation, I'll give you an example. Somebody says to me, I believe in equality. There's a good one. And I'll say to them, what do you mean by equality? Okay? And they'll say, I believe that all people should get the same. I say, okay. So, what'd you say?
Communism, it don't work.
It's very, no. I'm not attacking their belief. Right? I'm saying, okay, I'll say to them, look, I don't use the word equality that way. I use equality to mean that everyone has the same opportunity. But the results may vary. Because some people work harder than others. Some people are more blessed than others. Some people have different connections, whatever. And they'll say, that's not equality at all. I said, okay. So we disagree on the word equality. Maybe we can try to adjust our definition so at least we can have a conversation. Let's call your definition equality of outcome. And we'll call my definition equality of opportunity. Okay. So now we've kind of created two different definitions that both have the word equality in it, but it's very clear we're talking about different things. But now I know what you're talking about, and you know what I'm talking about, and now we can have a rational conversation. And I could argue to you, let's say, because I think communism was a bad idea, I could say, I think that equality of outcome is often a bad idea. And that equality of opportunity is generally better for society. Now we can have a rational conversation. Because now you might argue, no, I don't think so. I think equality of outcome is better for society than equality of opportunity. Why do you think that? Now, what's your evidence? What's your stories? Where do you see it in history? Where do we see that it's been tried before in both ways? What were the results? Can we show counterexamples? Can we bring up, potential projects and experiments? And now we're having a conversation. Now we're having a real dialogue with people but it wouldn't have been possible until we were clear on what the words meant and where we differed in that definition. So that's here. Whenever you're talking to somebody, this is so common. It could be with family, it could be with friends, it could be with teachers. Rabbi, so you're in a seminary, right? Here's one of the things that makes it a little bit challenging sometimes. Different rabbis might use different words differently. Different rabbis might use the same word differently. I've seen this in the Sfarim, right? You know what nefesh, ruach, and neshama mean? Generally, the Rambam uses those words differently than the Ramban. They mean different things. I know, because I was very confused. I'm reading Rambam in yeshiva, and I'm going, but wait. I say, Rebbe, the way he's using the word nefesh and neshama is exactly the opposite of the Ramban. When the Ramban uses nefesh, the Rambam uses neshama. And when the Ramban uses neshama, the Rambam uses nefesh. And they're not even exactly the same, but they're kind of the same. But they're kind of the same and different words. And my Rebbe said to me, he goes, you're right. They actually do use the word differently. I said, how come nobody warned me? It's confusing. I spent how many hours confused until I realized, I don't think they really use the words the same way. So that's Rishonim, and they're using words differently. You come to a Benoz Bina, and the way that different Rebbeim or different Moras that stand in front of you, we might say the exact same word and mean something a little different or very different. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Your job is to make sure is it different? And if so, how? And you might have to ask. You might say, Rabbi so-and-so, you just said, I don't know, emunah, right? And the way you use the word emunah, I've heard the word emunah used differently. If you want to throw me under the bus, go ahead. Rabbi Goldstein used the word differently, right? That's fine. Or if you want to be a little nicer to me, you go, I heard a rabbi use the word emunah and he meant different. What do you mean by emunah? Great! Now you're thinking. Now you're trying to pull apart. Okay. So this rabbi when he uses emunah, he means this. And when this rabbi uses the word emunah, he means that. And maybe there's a little bit of overlap. Maybe there's not. Maybe they mean totally different things. Fine. Now you know, and now when you're writing in your notes and you're trying to understand, okay, I get it. When Rabbi so-and-so uses emunah, that's the same exact thing that Rabbi so-and-so is when they're using the word bitachon. They're actually talking about the same thing. I can tell by the way they're using it that they mean the same thing, they're just using different words. Okay, cool, I got it. Now I can have a conceptual framework in my head of what it is they're talking about and not get confused. Okay, question. Yeah, go for it. Sometimes, but it's hard to tell, right? Because, again, who's more right, Rambam or Ramban, right? Right? And I'm not comparing myself and the other Rebbeim and Baros Bina to those two great rabbis, but when I use words, it's based on different rabbis that came before me. So it could be, using the Rambam and Ramban as an example, it could be that the way I teach is based on a Masorah that goes all the way back to the Rambam, and another Rebbe teaches based on a Masorah that goes all the way back to the Ramban. Right? And so it's not that I'm right or he's right, it's that we're based on different Masorahs of what the words mean. And Shivim Panim B'Torah, right? There's a lot of room within Torah to understand how things mean. Sometimes people try to argue that they're not really different definitions, that there's different angles and aspects on the same thing. Which is fine. So you should know that.
The word love, right? Every person has, a different definition to it.
Love.
In a way?
Often people have different definitions for it.
But is there one that is correct?
So if you take a look, the most complete discussion of love that I've seen in a Jewish source was from Rabbi Orlovsky. I saw a class from him where he goes through, in Shir Hashirim, there's a pasuk that uses 4 languages for love. I forget the pasuk, but something like biti, achoti, yonati, my sister, my daughter, my dove. There's a 4th one. Is anybody remotely familiar with that pasuk? Maybe you've heard of it before. So Rabbi Orlovsky points out that the 4 languages in the pasuk of Shir Hashirim are related to 4 different things that will awaken love in your heart. Right? 2 of them we've discussed, which is giving and knowledge. And those are the 2 most common, biggest ones. The 2 that are less frequently discussed but are in the pasuk are gratitude. When you focus on what someone has done for you good, that will awaken a love for them in your heart. It's a reflection of gratitude. And although it's not as commonly discussed, it's actually the biggest one in terms of love for Hashem. Right? Hakaras Hatov for Hashem is the biggest way to come to love Hashem according to most sources. Although the Rambam and the Chavas Levavos both say that the biggest way to come to have love in your heart for Hashem is actually from knowledge. Right? And knowledge of what? 2 things. Knowledge of Torah and knowledge of Teva, knowledge of nature. The way that God spoke to us through Torah and the way that He runs the world through nature. If you understand them, you will come to have a deep love for God. But other sources say the best way to love God is to reflect on all the good He's done for you in your life. So that's gratitude. And the 4th one is when you are related to someone, there's a natural affinity and love you have for someone you're related to. And that's why Hashem calls us Banim Lamakom, the children of the Almighty, and we say Avinu Shebashamayim, and we're supposed to look at all Jews as our brothers and sisters. Well, I'm a little older than you, so you're more like my daughters, right? But you're actually all exactly the right age to be my daughters, considering my oldest son is, I think, older than all of you. So if we look at each other as being related, that will awaken in our hearts an affection and love for each other just from the fact that we're related. So that's the 4. According to that idea, there's 4 sources: knowledge, giving, gratitude, and being related. Okay? Okay, cool. So now, everything we said up until now has really been trying to understand, trying to know, how do I break it down, let's be precise. How do we now translate all this into das? Remember, what does das mean?
Wisdom.
Yeah, but what do we mean by wisdom? What do we mean by wisdom?
Intimate knowledge.
Intimate knowledge. What does that mean ultimately? Good. Knowledge that's changed you. By the way, the Rambam calls this chachma. He uses a different word, which is why it's so confusing. Because the Rambam says, for example, Rav Berkowitz, who's the Rosh Yeshiva Torah now, he said, the Rambam says, I remember this Rambam, 20-something years, I remember it. He says, a chacham, right, meaning what we're translating as a wise person, but in a modern translation would be a knowledgeable person, but it's not what he means. He doesn't mean a knowledgeable person. He means a wise person. And I'll show you from what he says. He says, a chacham only has an appetite for healthy food. Now, that's a very weird statement. Because if you want to tell me a chacham only eats healthy food, fine. But only has an appetite for healthy food? Like, can you control your appetite? Yes, but it takes a lot of work. And it takes internalizing and becoming intimate with that knowledge to such an extent that you're like, ugh, like you know it's bad for you, you don't even have an appetite for it. The example would be, if you saw, I don't know, do you guys like chocolate bars?
Sure, yeah.
Right? So if I put a chocolate bar in front of you, you might have an appetite for it. But if I took the exact same chocolate bar and I put it in a used diaper, your appetite for it would disappear immediately. No, I'll clean it off for you. No, it's okay. No, it's fine. I'll really no. Like, in fact, you would actually feel nauseated by it. Why? Because your knowledge of what it means to be in a used diaper is so real to you that it changes your appetite. So imagine you had the same das, the same, he calls it chachma, but the same internalization of how that processed sugary, cupcake, it's death. That is killing me, right? I see it and I'm nauseated by the very sight of it. That's the goal. I'm not there. I'm not pretending. But that is, according to the Rambam, the goal of knowledge is to be so real with you that it changes how you feel. You are changed by your emotions. Probably I'll tell you a story. This story stuck in my mind also for many years. So they say about the Chavetz Chaim that when he wrote his sefer about Lashon Hara, so he wanted to get haskama. So you guys know what haskamas are? Get rabbis to sign off. It's a good book. But he didn't have smicha, right? And not everybody knew him yet. He wasn't like super famous yet. It was one of his earlier books, I think. So he went to a couple of rabbeim to get haskama for his book, and they were like, well, let's test him to see how well he knows the halachas. Does this guy really know the halachas of Lashon Hara before we sign up in the book? So the story goes that he sat down with the rebbeim, and one of the rebbitzins came, brought some tea and some biscuits, and then they were, schmoozing, what do rabbis talk about? Probably something in learning, right? Rashi and the Parsha, blah, blah. And then after a few minutes, one of the rabbis turned to him and said, so did you hear about Reb Shloimi from the next tent? Like he started to, not really, but pretend to speak Lashon Hara to see how the Chavetz Chaim would react. And the story goes that when he started to do that, the Chavetz Chaim fell asleep. Eyes closed, chin dropped, and just passed out. I don't know if he snored. I'm just doing that for effect, right? And the two rabbis kind of looked at each other and like, maybe he's really tired, a long journey here. So they kind of gently woke him up, give him some tea. And a few more minutes passed, and then the second rabbi said, so did you hear about Rabbi Yaakov from... Again, fell asleep. Not like, okay, something's going on here. So they wake him up again, and they admit to him that they were trying to test him. And he said, oh, okay, now I understand. He says, I've trained myself over the years that when the moment I begin to hear Lashon Hara, I fall asleep so I don't hear it.
Cool.
It's a crazy story, right? So that's a madrega, as they say, right? That's a level. Now, can you imagine that we could have that kind of control over the reactions of our body to whatever? Pick your poison, right? Whatever it is that you want to avoid, or whatever it is that you want to do right. Imagine you trained yourself that the moment you woke up, you were just like a smile upon your face. Thank you, Hashem. And just joy. From the moment you felt consciousness to wake with joy and jump out of bed, like it says in the Shulchan Aruch, Oz Kanomer, and all that stuff. Like, yeah, let's go, right? That would be remarkable. We would be different human beings if we could do that. I don't know, maybe you do that. I don't do that. Right? Well, we would be different human beings. I will tell you one thing. I did train myself. I trained myself not to use the snooze button. Anyone here use the snooze button? If you don't, good for you. If you do, you got to stop. It's really bad for you, the snooze button. It's actually physiologically bad for you because because your brain and your body are like, oh, it's time to wake up. Oh no.
So I always know when I fall
back to sleep
for like the last 10 minutes that I wake up before, it's like much worse than if I just would have gotten up.
Yeah, always like that. So you got to train yourself to not use the snooze button. You got to be like, whether it is keep your alarm clock across the room or I trained myself to over about. When I read about how bad snooze button is for you, it took me about a week or so, maybe 2, and then I haven't used a snooze button in years. And 99.999% of the time, I get up. Alarm goes off, I get up. Once in a long while, I fall back to sleep. But as one of my rabbis said, if you fell back asleep, you needed to sleep. Okay. So how do we begin this process of really internalizing these ideas and making them a part of ourselves? Right? That's what we're trying to understand how to do. So how do we actually do it? So what Musar does, the Musar movement, the whole approach is to repeat again and again and again and again and again all of the Torah, the halachas, the reward and the punishments about whatever the specific thing is you're trying to internalize. Right? So let's say Lashon Hara was the thing. Let's say that's it. I'm done. I'm really going to work on myself on internalizing the wisdom of how bad Lashon Hara is and how we should never speak it. And I really want to train myself to never speak it. Really make it a part of my life. Right? So what would you do? The Muslim movement would tell you. So you read the Sefer, either the whole thing or a part of it, again and again and again, every day. You make a Seder out of it, you read it. And not just read it like mindlessly, but really sit there and take a few moments to think about how bad Lashon Hara is and how amazing the reward would be if you stop speaking Lashon Hara, and how terrible the punishment is to speak Lashon Hara, and how much it damages relationships in society. And the rabbis say that the Beis HaMikdash is not rebuilt because we're still speaking Lashon Hara. Can you imagine that if we would just all stop speaking Lashon Hara and we could be redeemed and brought back to Yerushalayim, Mashiach could come? That's what would happen if every Jew stopped speaking Lashon Hara. The Beis HaMikdash should be built tomorrow. Mashiach would come right now. That's what the Gemara says. Any generation at the Beis HaMikdash didn't come yet, the Mashiach didn't come yet, is because we're still doing the same mistake, which the rabbis say is sinas chinam, of which the number one representative way of action is in Lashon Hara. So if you imagine you did that every day, it doesn't have to be an hour. You could do it for 2 minutes. But a regular Seder, that's the Musar approach. Regular Seder, do it again and again and again. As far as I can tell, the Hasidic approach is primarily through tefillah. Right, through davening. That you daven it, and I don't know if it's every davening or once a day, once a week, but you pick there's a davening Seder, where you're just sitting and you cry to Hashem, Hashem, please help me to take away this bad midah, or to internalize this good midah, whatever it is. I'm using Jewish examples, of course, but you can use, outside, secular, real world examples of whatever the thing is that you want to internalize. You want this to be real. Okay, I know it, I have the information, and it makes sense. It makes sense. You can't make it das if it doesn't make sense. It makes sense. I get it. I've seen this is true. Right? Let's use a physical example. So we're talking about cupcakes and sugar. Do I have knowledge that sugar is damaging to my body? Yes. Have I looked through the evidence? Have I read about it? Have I, talked to doctors about it? I have. I actually did a lot of research on it. Is it clear to me across the evidence that eating processed sugary food is bad for me? Yes, it is completely clear. So how can I drink a bottle of Coke? How is it possible? Because I haven't internalized the knowledge yet. So, I would of course use both approaches. Number one, Hashem, please help me. This is so bad. I'm not healthy. I'm damaging my body. I don't want to do this anymore, right? And, go through my research. Okay, how bad is sugar again? Right. Fructose, you guys know what sugar is made out of? Fructose and sucrose, right? We'll talk about it. We do a little Musar, right? Right? Sugar is made out of two chemicals, two molecules, fructose and glucose. Right? Sugar is usually called sucrose. Sucrose is two molecules stuck together. A molecule of glucose and a molecule of fructose. Okay, that's cool. Glucose, not so bad. It's used by every cell in your body. Every single cell in the body can use the energy from glucose. But fructose, no. There are no cells in your body that can use it. It's a poison. All of the fructose you consume has to be cleansed like a poison from your body by your liver. It's just like alcohol. The difference between alcohol and fructose is 10% of alcohol gets absorbed in your brain. That's what makes you drunk. Now, what happens when a person drinks too much alcohol? What happens to their liver? It gets damaged and scarred. It's called cirrhosis of the liver. That's what happens. Now, what the doctors have shown us is there's something called non-alcohol fatty liver disease and non-alcohol cirrhosis of the liver. If you eat too much sugar, the fructose literally destroys your liver the exact same way that an alcoholic destroys their liver from drinking alcohol. Exactly the same way. Literally the same process happens. Right? On top of that, what does your liver do, even before it gets damaged? What does the liver do with all the extra fructose that it can't get rid of? It turns it into fat. Okay. And where does it put that fat?
All over.
Nope. It doesn't. That would be okay if it went all over. The fat goes specifically around your organs in your stomach. It goes around your intestines. It goes around your liver. It goes around your pancreas. It goes around your gallbladder. It goes all around here. Now this, you see this? This is death. This right here. This is diabetes. This is heart disease. This is stroke. This is heart attack. This is early death. All right here. Right? It's called visceral fat. Fat around your organs. If you have fat all around your body, that's totally fine. It's actually not unhealthy at all. Right? That's called subcutaneous fat. Fat that's under your skin. Some people have more than others. Some people are bigger. Some people are smaller. That has nothing to do with your health. But if you've got a bulging belly, specifically what they call it a beer belly,
Yeah.
right? It's really a sugar belly. Okay? This means that you have extra fat that your liver has deposited around your organs. Guess what happens to, let's say, your pancreas when it's had fat deposited around it? It can't function anymore. What does that lead to? Diabetes. Right? And so all of it is coming from this guy right here. Every bit of it. And where's all that coming from? Every cupcake, every piece of chocolate, every drink of soda, every drink of fruit juice. Fruit juice is not better than soda. It's just as bad as soda. Right? You eat a fruit? Great. Go for it. 1 cup of orange juice is like 8 oranges with all the good stuff pulled out and just the sugary liquid put in. How long would it take you to eat 8 oranges? Could you even eat 8 oranges in one sitting? Probably not. And if you did, it'd take you like an hour. By the 8th one, you'd be like, ugh, right? But you squeeze them all into a cup and you're like, your liver's like, stop it, right? So what I just did with you for 3-4 minutes was a musar on how to internalize my knowledge of how bad sugar is and turn it into das. And I did it just as much for me as it did for you. Because Lord knows I help it too. Please, Misham, please. You know, for years I was addicted to Coke. I mean the drink. And just in case I don't want any confusion. Okay. Sometimes I'll say that joke. I mean, it's a joke, but it's also real. Because I really was never the other Coke. But sometimes I'll say to a group, I'll say, you know, I used to have a really bad Coke problem. And people go, I said, you know, Coca-Cola. And they're like, oh. Yeah. So I used to drink 2 liters a day. Can you imagine? Because I would go to work. Remember Hurricane Sandy? You guys are probably young already, but Hurricane Sandy, my shul was trashed, and we were working out of another shul for a while, and we had like a whole storehouse of like Coke bottles. And I would come into work, you know, I have classes, I'm teaching online, phone calls, setting up classes. I would come into work, bring out a 2-liter bottle, put it on my desk. By the end of the day, it was empty. Right? For like 5 days a week. And then I started reading about this stuff. I didn't know about this stuff. I mean, it's not like I'm sitting there going, Coke is good for you. Like, obviously not. But I didn't know the science, the biology, so I started reading it. I was like, oh my goodness. And I also started to notice, you know, death creeping up on me. So I was like, okay, what do I do? So I went through a whole process of quitting drinking Coca-Cola. It took me a while. It was very hard. It's very hard.
It was like a real addiction?
Yeah.
2 liters a day.
2 liters a day. It was a real addiction.
Why we needed it.
I mean, I thought it did, right? And yeah. I was actually seriously addicted to Coca-Cola. And many people that have quit drugs and quit sugar have said that it's just as hard, if not harder, to quit sugar as it is to quit drugs. People that have done both. I never did drugs. I would admit if I did. I'm not like, I wouldn't be embarrassed about it. That's what happened in the past. I never did. I think maybe I got a little high from people around me that used to smoke pot, but I never did. They were just, I used to hang out with a whole bunch of guys. I used to hang out with a whole group of potheads. I never did. The number one reason I never smoked pot was because I saw what people that did look like. No joke. And I looked at them and went, I never want to look that stupid. And one guy, there was a cigar that they took out the tobacco and put in marijuana instead. It's called a blunt. I don't know if you ever heard that word. And he was sitting there and he like smoked it, right? It looks really dumb. If you've ever seen it, you know what I'm talking about. And then he like goes to hand it to me because he's high and forgot that I don't smoke. And because I thought it was amusing, just looked at him. At least 20 seconds passed. I don't want to exaggerate. I don't want to be like 5 minutes. At least 20 seconds passed. But count to 20. 1,000, 2, 1,000. It's a long time. And then he turns and he goes, oh, sorry, man. And then he goes to get it. So 20 seconds, you stand there. I looked at that. I'm like, I never, ever want to be that kind of person. It's just not my thing. So I used to hang out, and when I was there, playing cards, games, whatever, with my friends, I would sit by the window and I would have a fan. And I would have the fan blowing the smoke out so it wouldn't get to me. And I discovered, you know how they say that cats, when they fall, they always land on their feet?
Yeah.
So there was a cat in the tree outside of the window, and the cat got completely high from the smoke.
Oh, really?
Now, the way I know is I heard the cat. Cat was freaking out. And then the cat fell out of the tree and he did not land on his feet. She's crying. Look at her, she's crying. Have I told you the story? Have I told you the story? Oh, you heard the story. Okay. You look like you recognize part of the story. Anyway.
The fan works.
So, my assumption is that it worked mostly, but I do remember every time I left, I always wanted a snack. And I hear that people, they want a snack. But I never felt different, but maybe I had like a little bit, whatever. Okay. Internalize. That is the goal. My opinion is that you really want to do both. You really want to follow, the Musar way and the Hasidic way at the same time, which would mean pick one. Tafasta meruba lo tafasta, the rabbis say. If you try to do too many things, then you're not doing anything at all. Pick one thing that's important to you at a time that you want to internalize and turn from knowledge and understanding into real seichel and das, wisdom, and it's changed you, and make it into an avoida. It's an avoida.
Is that C?
Yeah. I just I gave an example, right? Right here, I'll put it. Right, use Musar and Chasidus. Right, to internalize knowledge and turn it into wisdom. Obviously, there are tons of things we want to work on ourselves in Judaism, and as much as I'm joking about the whole sugar thing, it really is actually quite important. I remember reading one of the Rishonim. I think it's the Rabbeinu Hananel. I'm like 95% sure. I was reading. It was a commentary. I was learning Gemara, and on the side of this particular Gemara was Rabbeinu Hananel. And I don't know why it came up. I just don't remember the context. It was many years ago. But I remember what he said very clearly because it stuck in my mind, jumped out at me like, wow, that's so crazy. He said that to a Yid, unhealthy food, you should treat it as if it were treif. Because it's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. Shamor nafshei seichem. Guard your soul, which the rabbis interpret means take care of your health. And so, if you have a mitzvah to take care of your health, that means it's an avera to eat unhealthy food. That's how he described it. Right? Now, it's not written anywhere that it's actually an avera, but if you think about it, it's like, it kind of makes sense. It's not an illogical statement. Obviously it's a Rishon. Obviously he knows what he's talking about. But looking at it from my perspective, I get that. And so that should be something that could be our avoda, right? This is one of the things that I'm trying to work on. Trying to get enough sleep, trying to get some exercise. Started exercising again for the first time since COVID, basically. We'll see how that works out. So if we can, but you can pick anything. Pick Lashon Hara. You can pick, I want to make sure that I get up in the morning to daven. You can pick, I want to get up with Maidani and real joy in my heart. Pick something. There's lots of stuff. Maybe there's something you're already working on. Maybe you want to enhance that. Okay, so do that. You want to add something else? Fine. Just don't do too many things at once. Okay. Ultimately, at the end of the day, imagine you took one thing at a time and you really made it a part of yourself. You've changed the way you think. You've changed the way that you feel. You've changed the way that you speak. And you've changed the way that you act. Right? For olamos, right? You changed your entire being in one area. You're a different person now. Right? You're a different person now. You're a better person now. And then you do it again. And you do it again. And do it again. Before you know it, you're a giant. You're unbelievable. Like you just leaps and bounds and growing. That's what we want. To become wise in all areas of life. Okay, questions? Okay. Yeah, so I'll stop the recording for the class and then I'll take questions.